In the heart of the city, where tall glass buildings reached for the sky and streets buzzed with life, a special event was about to take place. The city's planning department had invited some of the best architects in the country to present their ideas for a new civic complex, a building that would house offices, meeting halls, and community spaces. This wasn't just any building. It was meant to be a landmark, a symbol of progress and innovation for the whole city. Among the crowd waiting inside the large hall was a young woman named Maya. She was not just any visitor. Maya had a keen interest in architecture and design. What made her stand out at first glance was that she moved around in a wheelchair. But Maya was not someone who let her disability define her or limit her dreams. She had always been passionate about buildings, especially how they could be made more welcoming and accessible to everyone. Today, she was here to watch and learn, and perhaps to challenge some ideas. The hall was full of excitement. On one side, there were city officials, eager to see the plans and make decisions. On the other side were architects from various firms, some wearing sharp suits and holding folders filled with blueprints. In the center of attention was the chief architect, Mr. Donnelly. He was a man in his 50s, known for his bold designs and confident attitude. He had been working on this project for months, and everyone expected him to deliver a spectacular presentation. As the lights dimmed, a large screen lit up behind the stage. Mr. Donnelly stepped up to the podium, a smile spreading across his face. He began speaking in a clear, strong voice that filled the room. "Good morning, everyone," he said. "Thank you for joining us today. I'm proud to present what we believe is the future of civic architecture, a building that blends beauty, functionality, and cutting-edge technology." The audience nodded politely. Mr. Donnelly clicked a button, and the first images of the building appeared on the screen. It was a stunning structure, with glass walls that reflected sunlight, sweeping curves and open spaces that looked both modern and inviting. The renderings showed people walking through spacious halls, sitting in bright lounges, and attending meetings in high-tech rooms. As he described the features, Mr. Donnelly's voice grew more enthusiastic. He talked about sustainable materials, smart energy systems, and artistic designs inspired by nature. It was clear he had put a lot of thought and effort into the project. He paced the stage confidently, gesturing toward the images as if painting a picture with words. Yet, despite the applause and praise, Maya noticed something else, something that most people in the room didn't seem to see. As she looked carefully at the design, she spotted small but important details that were missing. There were no clear paths for wheelchair users to navigate easily. The ramps, if any, appeared too steep. She couldn't find any signs or tactile markers that would help people with visual impairments move around safely. Maya had learned these things through her experience. She had faced many challenges herself and knew how frustrating it could be when buildings were designed without considering people with disabilities. It wasn't just about convenience, it was about dignity, independence, and fairness. When the presentation ended, Mr. Donnelly invited questions from the audience. Maya felt her heart beat faster. She wanted to speak up, to share what she had noticed, but at the same time she felt a bit nervous. After all, this was a room full of experts, and she was just one person in a wheelchair. Still, Maya raised her hand, and the room turned toward her. She spoke clearly but respectfully. "I appreciate the design and the effort that has gone into this building," she began. "However, I have some concerns about its accessibility. From what I see, the ramps might be too steep for wheelchair users, and there don't seem to be enough accessible restroom paths. Also, the building lacks tactile indicators that help visually impaired people find their way." A hush fell over the room. Some people whispered among themselves, surprised by her comments. Mr. Donnelly's smile faded. He looked at Maya and laughed lightly. "With all due respect," he said, "this building wasn't designed for wheelchairs to roll into board meetings. It's meant to be a landmark for the city, and sometimes practicality has to take a back seat to vision and style. The laughter around the room made Maya feel small, but she didn't back down. Her eyes met his, steady and confident. She knew that what she was saying was important. The room was quiet again. Some people seemed unsure. Was Mr. Donnelly right? Was Maya being unreasonable? But others, especially those who understood the struggle for accessible spaces, felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was the moment when things could change. As the meeting ended, Maya packed up her things. Though she had been laughed at, she felt proud of herself for speaking out. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but this was just the beginning. The city needed to hear voices like hers, voices that reminded people that architecture was not just about buildings, but about the people who lived, worked, and moved inside them. Outside the hall, the city buzzed on, unaware that a quiet challenge had just been made, one that would shake up the world of architecture and accessibility forever. After Maya had raised her hand and spoken about the building's lack of accessibility, the atmosphere in the room changed. The chief architect, Mr. Donnelly, who had been smiling confidently just moments before, now looked at her with a mixture of surprise and irritation. The laughter that followed his words was sharp and dismissive. It cut through the polite silence like a cold wind. Maya's voice had been calm, polite, and respectful. She pointed out important details, details that many people didn't think about when admiring a beautiful building. But the reaction she received was the opposite of encouragement. Mr. Donnelly's laugh was not kind, it was mocking. He said, "With all due respect, this building wasn't designed for wheelchairs, to roll into board meetings." His words echoed through the room. Some people chuckled quietly, others exchanged awkward glances. The message was clear. Maya's concerns were not welcome, and her perspective was not valued. The architects and officials present seemed to agree, or at least chose to pretend they did. Maya sat back in her wheelchair, feeling the sting of humiliation. She had spoken up for people like her, people who often found themselves excluded from spaces that were supposed to be public and welcoming. Yet here she was, being laughed at by the very person responsible for designing the building. But Maya was not someone to give up easily. She understood why Mr. Donnelly might feel threatened. He had spent months perfecting his design, and now a young woman with a disability was challenging his vision. He saw her as a problem rather than a partner. But Maya knew better. Accessibility was not a problem to be hidden or ignored. It was a fundamental part of good design. As the laughter died down, Maya decided to explain further. She spoke up again, her voice steady and firm. She described how difficult it was for wheelchair users to navigate spaces that were not designed with their needs in mind. She explained the steep ramps, the narrow doorways, and the absence of tactile signs for the visually impaired. She told the room stories of her own experiences, how she struggled to enter buildings, how she avoided places because she knew they wouldn't be accessible, and how these challenges made her feel invisible in a world designed for others. Her words were personal but universal, touching on the everyday struggles faced by millions. Some members of the audience began to listen more closely. They started to understand that Maya was not just complaining, she was educating. She was opening their eyes to a side of architecture they had overlooked. But Mr. Donnelly was not ready to listen. He interrupted her several times, defending his design with technical jargon and arguing that including all accessibility features would be too expensive and would compromise the building's aesthetic. He said that the building was meant to be iconic, a masterpiece that would put the city on the map. This attitude angered some people in the room. They whispered among themselves, questioning why functionality was being sacrificed for style. Others looked uncomfortable, unsure of how to react. Maya knew she had to stand her ground. She calmly countered Mr. Donnelly's arguments by citing examples of other famous buildings around the world that were both beautiful and accessible. She mentioned museums, airports, and public spaces that had successfully combined elegance, With inclusivity, she talked about laws and regulations that required buildings to be accessible, not just as a legal obligation, but as a moral one. She emphasized that designing for accessibility did not limit creativity. Instead, it challenged architects to think differently and innovate. The room grew quiet again, the tension thick in the air. Some people admired Maya's knowledge and courage, while others remained skeptical or indifferent. But the moment had shifted. The conversation was no longer just about a building. It was about values, respect, and the right of every person to be included. Despite the resistance, Maya felt a small spark of hope. She knew that change often started with discomfort and disagreement. Today, she had planted a seed in the minds of those present. Maybe one day, that seed would grow into a movement. As the meeting ended, Maya packed up her notes and prepared to leave. She noticed a few people approaching her quietly, thanking her for speaking out. Some asked questions, wanting to learn more about accessibility. These small gestures gave her strength. Outside the hall, the city continued its busy rhythm, unaware of the quiet battle that had just taken place within its walls. But Maya knew that her fight was only beginning. She was determined to keep raising her voice until the world of architecture included everyone, no matter their abilities. After the tense meeting in the city planning hall, where Maya had spoken up and been laughed at by Mr. Donnelly, the chief architect, life seemed to move on as usual. But what had happened that day was quietly beginning to ripple far beyond the walls of that conference room. A young journalist named Sarah had been present at the event. She was there to cover the unveiling of the new building design and had brought her camera along to capture the moments that would tell the story. Sarah was sharp, curious, and passionate about social justice. When she saw Maya courageously challenge the powerful architect, she knew there was more to the story than just architecture. During the question and answer session, Sarah had discreetly recorded the exchange on her phone. She captured the moment when Maya raised her concerns and when Mr. Donnelly laughed and dismissed her. The contrast between Maya's calm determination and Donnelly's arrogance was striking. Sarah felt compelled to share this moment with the world. That evening, Sarah edited the video carefully, highlighting Maya's questions and Donnelly's dismissive laugh. She posted the clip on social media with a caption that read, "When the future of our city's buildings ignores the needs of all citizens." The video quickly began to spread. Within hours, thousands of people had watched it. Comments poured in, some angry at Mr. Donnelly's attitude, others expressing support for Maya. People with disabilities shared their own experiences of exclusion and frustration. Allies applauded Maya's courage in speaking up. The video was shared by advocacy groups, local news outlets, and even some national media. Suddenly, Maya was no longer just a quiet woman in a wheelchair in the back of the room. She became a symbol of a larger issue: how society often overlooks accessibility and inclusion. As the video went viral, reporters and journalists wanted to learn more about Maya. They reached out to her for interviews. Initially, Maya was hesitant. She had never sought the spotlight. But she understood that this was an opportunity to bring attention to the importance of accessible design. During her interviews, Maya shared her story. She explained how she was born with a condition that limited her mobility but never limited her dreams. She talked about her education and the many challenges she had faced growing up. Most importantly, she revealed something few people expected. She had a master's degree in architecture and was a certified accessibility consultant. This revelation shocked many. How could the chief architect, a man who had laughed at her, not know that Maya was a professional in the same field? More importantly, how could he ignore the expertise of someone who specialized in making buildings accessible? Maya explained that she had spent years working with architects and developers to improve their designs. She had helped transform schools, hospitals, and public spaces so that they were welcoming to everyone: people in wheelchairs, those with visual impairments, and others with different needs. Her job was to make sure that no one was left behind. The media coverage began to change the conversation around the building project. No longer was it just about style or prestige. It was about responsibility, inclusion, and respect. City officials started to pay closer attention to the concerns Maya raised. One powerful editorial described Maya as a voice of reason and compassion in a world too often blinded by pride and tradition. The article called on architects and city planners to rethink their priorities and remember that buildings are for people, not just monuments. Meanwhile, Mr. Donnelly's image began to suffer. Some people defended him, saying he was just passionate about his work and didn't intend to offend. Others criticized him for arrogance and failing to listen. The city council received letters and emails from concerned citizens demanding a review of the building's accessibility. Maya, meanwhile, continued to advocate for change. She held workshops and gave talks about inclusive design. Her story inspired many young people with disabilities to pursue careers in architecture and urban planning. Despite the sudden attention and praise, Maya remained humble. She saw herself, not as a hero, but as someone simply asking for fairness. Her goal was clear: to make the city a better place for everyone. The viral video, the interviews, and the growing public support created pressure on the city council to act. They called a special meeting to discuss the building plans and invited Maya to present her detailed accessibility review. This time, the room was filled with more than just architects and officials. Members of the public, disability advocates, and journalists were there to witness the event. When Maya spoke, she was confident and prepared. She showed slides highlighting specific problems with the current design and practical solutions. Her expertise was undeniable. The city council asked questions and took notes. It was clear that things were changing. Backstage, Mr. Donnelly watched silently. He could no longer ignore Maya's knowledge or the public's growing respect for her. He realized that the old ways of designing buildings, ignoring accessibility and dismissing critics, were no longer acceptable. Maya's story was more than a personal victory. It was a turning point for the city and its future. Her voice had awakened a community to the importance of designing spaces where everyone, regardless of ability, could feel included and valued. The revelation of who Maya really was, an expert, an advocate, and a leader, shattered old assumptions. It reminded everyone that sometimes those who are underestimated have the most important things to say. And so, a new chapter began, one where architecture was no longer just about shapes and colors, but about people's lives and dignity. Maya's courage to speak up, even when laughed at, had sparked a movement that would change the city forever. After Maya's video went viral and the public outcry grew louder, the city council could no longer ignore the concerns she had raised. The initial excitement over the new civic building design began to fade as people started questioning whether the project truly served all citizens. City officials called for a special meeting to revisit the plans. This time Maya was invited, not just as a member of the public, but as an expert. The council wanted her to present her accessibility review formally, to explain why her concerns were important and how the building could be improved. The day of the meeting arrived, and the council chamber was packed. Reporters, citizens, disability rights advocates, and architects filled the room. There was an air of anticipation. Many people hoped this meeting would mark a turning point. Maya entered the chamber quietly, her wheelchair rolling steadily as she moved to the front of the room. She carried her laptop and a folder filled with notes and drawings. She felt calm, but focused. This was her moment to make a real difference. She began by thanking the council for inviting her and recognizing the importance of accessibility. Then she pulled up her presentation on the large screen behind her. The images and diagrams showed exactly what was wrong with the original design and how it could be fixed. She pointed out how the ramps leading into the building were too steep. She explained that a steep ramp could be dangerous and impossible for many wheelchair users to climb without assistance. She showed examples of safer ramp angles and design alternatives used successfully in other public buildings. Next, she highlighted the lack of accessible restrooms on every floor. She explained that people with disabilities needed easy access to clean, well-equipped restrooms without having to travel long distances or use elevators multiple times. She proposed adding more restrooms and better signage to guide visitors. Then she discussed the missing tactile indicators. These are small, textured markers placed on floors and walls that help visually impaired people navigate buildings safely. Maya showed examples from other cities where these features had been integrated seamlessly into modern designs, proving that accessibility and aesthetics could go hand in hand. Throughout her presentation, Maya spoke clearly and confidently. She didn't just point out problems, she offered practical, tested solutions. She explained that accessible design was not about making buildings special for some people, but about creating spaces everyone could use comfortably and independently. The council members listened attentively. Some took notes, others nodded in agreement. Questions followed. Council members asked about costs, timelines, and how these changes might affect the building's overall design. Maya answered honestly. She admitted that some modifications might require extra investment, but she emphasized that the social and legal benefits far outweighed the costs. She reminded them that buildings that were accessible to all were more valuable, welcoming, and respected. She also talked about the city's legal obligations under disability rights laws. Ignoring accessibility was not just unfair. It could lead to lawsuits and public backlash. More importantly, it was a matter of human dignity and equality. As the discussion continued, it became clear that Maya's words were making an impact. Even some architects who had been skeptical started to nod in agreement. They realized that accessibility was not a limitation, but an opportunity to innovate. Among the audience was Mr. Donnelly, the chief architect. He sat quietly in the back, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a thoughtful, almost humbled expression. The room's energy had shifted, and he could no longer dismiss Maya's expertise or the public's concerns. After Maya finished, the council members deliberated. The tension was high, but the decision was unanimous. The building plans would be put on hold until revisions were made to address the accessibility issues Maya had highlighted. The room erupted in applause, but the most powerful moment was the respectful silence that followed when Maya's work was officially recognized. She had not only pointed out flaws, but had inspired a new way of thinking. In the weeks that followed, Maya was invited to join the team revising the building's design. She worked closely with architects, engineers, and city officials to make sure the new plans met the highest standards of accessibility. The collaboration was not always easy. There were debates, compromises, and technical challenges. But Maya's calm persistence and expert knowledge helped guide the team. She reminded them that their work was about people's lives, not just blueprints. The new design began to take shape. Ramps were redesigned with gentle slopes, restrooms were made accessible on every floor, and tactile indicators were carefully integrated into the floors and walls. The building was still modern and beautiful, but now it was welcoming to everyone. The city's residents noticed the change. Disability advocates praised the council for listening and taking action. People with disabilities felt seen and valued in a way they hadn't before. Maya's role as a leader in this process grew. She held workshops and training sessions for architects and builders, sharing her knowledge about inclusive design. Her work inspired others to think differently about how buildings should serve all people. Mr. Donnelly, too, changed. He publicly apologized for his earlier dismissive attitude and acknowledged Maya's important contributions. Privately, he reached out to her, eager to learn more and improve his understanding of accessibility. Maya accepted his apology but made it clear that respect and inclusion must always come first. Together they co-led a seminar on accessible architecture, bridging old ideas and new perspectives. This story became an example for other cities and architects. It showed that listening to diverse voices and embracing accessibility could lead to better, stronger, and more meaningful designs. In the end, Maya's courage to speak up, her expertise, and the City Council's willingness to listen marked a turning point, not just for one building, but for an entire community's approach to inclusion. The civic complex was no longer just a symbol of modern architecture. It became a symbol of hope, equality, and progress for all. After months of hard work, discussion, and redesign, the new civic complex was finally ready to be built. The city was buzzing with excitement. This wasn't just another building going up. It was a symbol of a new way of thinking, a place designed for everyone, no matter their abilities. The journey that started with Maya speaking out in a crowded room had led to something extraordinary. When the construction began, many people visited the site. There were architects, engineers, city officials, journalists, and citizens who had followed the story from the beginning. They all wanted to see the changes that had been made. Most of all, they wanted to see how a building could truly be accessible and beautiful at the same time. Maya visited the construction site often. She watched the workers carefully put the new plans into action. The gentle ramps, she had insisted on, were being built with the right slope and wide enough for easy use. The tactile markers were installed on floors and walls, subtle but helpful. Accessible restrooms were being placed on every floor, with clear signs in Braille and bright colors to guide visitors. One day, as she moved through the site, a group of young architecture students approached her. They had heard about her work and wanted to learn from her. Maya smiled and shared her experiences, encouraging them to always think about the people who would use the buildings they designed. She told them, "A building is not just bricks and glass. It's a home for everyone's dreams." The City Council organized a special ceremony to celebrate the start of construction. City leaders spoke about how the project had changed their understanding of architecture and inclusion. They praised Maya's courage and expertise, highlighting how her voice had sparked a movement for accessibility in the city. During the ceremony, Maya spoke again. She reminded everyone that this building was more than just a structure. It was a message that everyone mattered. She said, "When we design for all, we build a stronger, kinder community." The ceremony was filled with applause and hope. People from all walks of life felt proud to be part of this moment. As construction progressed, the media continued to follow the story. Documentaries and articles highlighted the city's efforts to make public spaces accessible. Maya became a respected leader in the field of inclusive design. She was invited to speak at conferences and universities, inspiring others to carry forward the work she had begun. The civic complex opened to the public a year later. The grand opening was a joyous event attended by thousands, including many people with disabilities who had waited years for a building designed with their needs in mind. Inside the building, visitors marveled at how welcoming it felt. The spacious halls, bright lighting, and clear signage made navigation easy. Wheelchair users moved freely without barriers. People with visual impairments used tactile paths to explore the space confidently. Families with small children, elderly citizens, and everyone else enjoyed the comfortable, thoughtful design. Maya walked through the building with a quiet smile. She knew the impact this place would have on people's lives. It was proof that inclusion was possible and that everyone deserved respect. The building soon became a model for other cities. Architects and planners visited to learn from its design. The city hosted workshops and training sessions, sharing knowledge and raising awareness. More importantly, the project had changed attitudes. People began to see accessibility not as an extra expense or a burden, but as an essential part of good design. Businesses and public offices started to adopt similar standards, creating a more inclusive environment citywide. Maya's journey also inspired many people with disabilities to pursue careers in architecture, engineering, and urban planning. They saw her as a trailblazer who proved that their voices mattered and that they could shape the world around them. Mr. Donnelly, the chief architect who once laughed at Maya, had become a vocal supporter of accessible design. He often credited her for opening his eyes and changing his perspective. Together they worked on new projects, blending creativity with inclusivity. The city's mayor announced a new policy requiring all public buildings to meet strict accessibility standards, making the civic complex the first of many accessible landmarks. Years later, Maya looked back on her journey with pride. She had faced dismissal and ridicule, but had stayed true to her vision. Her courage to speak up, her expertise, and her persistence had not only changed one building, but had sparked a movement that would improve countless lives. Maya's story was a reminder that change begins when someone dares to challenge the status quo. It showed that when people listen to diverse voices and work together, they can build a world where everyone belongs. The civic complex stood tall as a beacon of hope, inclusion, and progress. It was a testament to the power of kindness, respect, and the belief that every person deserves to be seen, heard, and valued. And so, the city moved forward, forever changed by the courage of a disabled girl who refused to be ignored, and by the building she helped create, a true home for all.